100 hours Central Africa time here on the Newsroom. Jumbo Africa. I'm Elvis Presley.
I'm Kendall Makamati Dumela Mbahaj.
We'll be with you until 12 o'clock today. Now, the focus today is on the Public Service Association that believes that the Steinhoff debacle goes beyond the accounting irregularities that the retail giant reported and that it involves corruption.
Absolutely. Why is it being called accounting irregularities? Is corruption by anyone else? And I will find out from you, what do you make of all this Steinhoff debacle?
Bokang says corruption is a cancer in our country.
Michael comes in with, he's not surprised at all. Many people take white monopoly capital for granted, and yet it's real and it's crippling our economy. Hawks are doing nothing. The opposition political party won't say a word about it because it's their cousins doing it. And yet we're told about the corruption in the government every week.
Well, there you have it. These are some of your comments. Please keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But we're also focusing on education. The Progress in International Reading Literacy Study, which is PEARLS, they measure the literacy levels and rates of grade 4 learners and has revealed that as many as 78% of our learners in this country, almost 80%, are not able to read any language.
Wow. 9 and 10-year-olds cannot understand what it is they see on a piece of paper. Shocking. We want to find out from you, who's to blame for this? We've got a few options that we would like you to look at. Is it the current curriculum? Is it teachers? Is it parents? Elvis and the respondents are quite clear who they think is to blame.
109 votes rather, and 55% of that 109 is suggesting that it is the current curriculum which is the problem. 23% blame it on the teachers, and 22% blame it on us as parents. But you're telling us about it as well. Kagiso says, this government has closed down teachers' colleges or teacher colleges, so how do we expect our kids to know how to read and write when they are taught by people who only took up teaching because they couldn't find employment anywhere else?
Kagiso, you know, hits the nail on the head. That might be part of the major issue behind all of this. Retabile, on the other hand, says no one. All three stakeholders must work together.
A very balanced view there from Retabile. So keep them coming and we'll read them as we continue. But we're also focusing on sports. The Blitzbokkies are back this weekend.
Yes, the Blitzbokke are back. You all know they are the current defending world champions. They didn't win the Cape Town series last year. And we want to find out from you, the Cape Town leg this year, will the Blitzbokke reverse the result and win it this year or not?
Let's take a look at what you're telling us. They come from Andrew Mare. It says, what a privilege to wish our boys well ahead of the Cape Town 7 this weekend. Best of luck, Blitzbokke. We are so proud of you. Die stad en die land staan vierkantig agter julle. Well, we're behind you all the way, says
Neil Wurgwerf says, if only the Springboks could bring the joy to my life that the Blitzbokke bring. The Blitzbokke are the only South African team that are currently world champions in their field. So yes, they bring a lot of joy to a lot of South Africans, they do.
Sad reality, there's only one team of us standing out, but yes, it's almost the end of the year. But right now, let's get down to business and take a look at your news headlines. The Public Service Association believes that the Steinhoff debacle goes beyond the accounting irregularities that the retail giant reported and that it involves corruption. The suspended head of the Gauteng Health Department, Dr. Bani Silabano, is expected to conclude his testimony at the SABC arbitration hearings in Parktown, Johannesburg today. And Hamas has urged Palestinians to abandon the peace efforts and launch a new uprising against Israel in response to the US President Donald Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as its capital. Well, we could smell it coming. It's going to be there. But that's your headline. But before we get anywhere further, let's find out from Kendall Makamate what's happening on the sports front.
Elvis, thank you very much. We're looking forward to a massive weekend. Yes, we're coming to the end of the year. A lot of the sports are going to start slowing down, so we're going to celebrate every single moment we get on the field of play from now until then. Good morning to you. This is what we've got for you in the sports today.
Back again to Mauritius. Here's a mistake at the back and Normal. Laying the ball through. Foster is onside. Foster goes in. Foster!
Amajita start off the COSAF Under-20 Cup campaign on a positive note after beating Mauritius 2-0 in Zambia. long sold-out second leg of the HSBC Sevens World Series kicks off in Cape Town tomorrow. And defending world champion South Africa aim to go all the way and win it this year after being shocked by England in last year's final.
Criminal sexual conduct, first degree, person under 13, defendant 17 years of age or older, victim A. How do you plead?
Guilty as stated, Your Honor.
Larry Nassar, a former U.S. gymnastics team doctor over 4 Olympic Games, has been given the maximum 60-year jail sentence on child pornography charges that grew out of a sex abuse investigation with more than 120 victims.
Today, Larry Nassar faced a day of reckoning.
All this and more I've got for you later on the Sports Bulletin. Do stay with Elvis as he's got the news.
Thank you, Kendall. Top story this hour, the Public Servants Association believes that the Steinhoff debacle goes beyond the accounting irregularities that the retail giant reported, and it involves corruption. The PSA intends to lay criminal charges against Steinhoff. It has already met with the Public Investment Corporation, the PIC, over the effect on government pension funds. Pension fund members have already lost more than 12 billion rand as a result of the Steinhoff scandal. The PSA spokesperson Tahir Mayepa says that the PIC assured them that they are engaging Steinhoff. It announced accounting irregularities in its financial statements this week. It led to stock value loss of more than 60% on Wednesday and over 30% of the remaining value yesterday. Meanwhile, the Finance Minister Malusi Gigaba says he supports the decision by the Financial Services Board to institute an independent investigation into the alleged false and misleading financial reports by Steinhoff. Gigaba has also welcomed an internal investigation by the Johannesburg Stock Exchange. So that is why we're asking you that very important question. What do you think about the debacle at Steinhoff and what it means for us as South Africans, especially people engaged with the PIC and the pension funds? What do you make of the Steinhoff debacle? Let us know what's on your mind on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Moving on, suspended head of the Gauteng Health Department, Dr. Barney Selabano, is expected to conclude his testimony at the SABC arbitration hearings in Parktown, Johannesburg today. Now, yesterday, Dr. Selabano refuted allegations that the Gauteng Premier was part of a collective that planned and approved the SABC transfers.
Solidarity and calls for justice for the victims of the SABC tragedy.
What is much more shameful is that we're not talking about 143. We may be talking about over 200 people here because there are 59 other people that have disappeared in the system.
These, some of the 143 mentally ill patients who died at unlawful NGOs. They died of hunger and dehydration after government terminated its contract with Life SABC.
I'm advised by...
But it's emerged that Dr. Barney Selabano, the man who signed off that deal, only approved the plan 1 year later. By then, 81 had already died. But Selabano refutes this, saying he signed it off in 2015.
Why would you have signed when after 81 people had already died?
Council, on face value, when you look at this, you are correct. But I want to implore you to believe me when I say this error was then carried on. And I want you to believe me.
Well, it wasn't an error, Doctor. It was exactly as it's stated here.
Lots of people have died. He was further accused of not wanting to be held responsible.
I hear you.
And take me quite seriously. You could perjure yourself a few times, and you could be charged for perjury.
Gauteng Premier David Makhura has previously denied knowledge of the transfers, but Selabano, though, says Makhura was aware of the termination. He said the plan was presented to Makhura's Budget Council, which the Premier chairs. But the state has moved to clarify Makhura's involvement.
Was the Premier involved during the meetings which were held?
In the department? No.
Indeed.
No.
While two expert witnesses will take the stand next and detail the steps that were taken to transfer surviving patients back to suitable facilities after the tragedy struck. Criselda Lewis, SABC News in Parktown, Johannesburg.
Now we'll go there live because it is the final day of the Life is Domini arbitration process for the year, so we'll go there live a little bit later. You don't want to miss it. Meanwhile, Constitutional Court Judge Bess Nkabinde says that she will testify in the tribunal against the Western Cape Judge President John Hlophe. In an exclusive interview with the SABC, as she goes into retirement, Justice Nkabinde refuted claims that she caused a delay in the matter.
And this marks the end of Justice Bess Nkabinde's tenure at the Constitutional Court, a 12-year term which she got a standing ovation for. But an unresolved matter which she won't let lie, a complaint against Western Cape Judge President John Hlophe.
Testifying, yes, we have said it many times. We are not running away from testifying. We said it in our affidavits. But let us deal with these legal aspects. So I think the matter will be finalized. I don't know when. The processes have to run. When the Office of the Chief Justice are ready with the tribunal. And in my view, we will testify.
Ago, Justice Nkabinde and Chris Jafta laid a complaint against Judge Hlophe. Hlophe denied that he tried to influence the justices to write a judgment which would favor Zuma, who was challenging the search and seizure warrant in a corruption investigation against him. The Judicial Service Commission did not find Hlophe guilty. However, this was successfully challenged in court by Freedom Under Law and the Western Cape Premier Helen Zille, which then warranted a new inquiry. But since then, legislation has changed, demanding a complaint against the judge must be done under a sworn statement. Justices Nkabinde and Jafta have unsuccessfully challenged this requirement, all the way up to the Constitutional Court.
We were litigants in this matter, and we were entitled, like any other litigants, to exhaust any remedies, not necessarily that we didn't want to testify.
The pair is also opposed to an NPA prosecutor being appointed as evidence leader. This while the DA awaits confirmation from the NPA whether it will be granted access to President Zuma's representation against a corruption prosecution. Alderin Simpia, SABC News, Johannesburg.
The Social, Education and Economic Development Foundation South Africa has urged men and women to stand in solidarity to fight violence against women and children. The event was held in Botshabelo, east of Bloemfontein. Now, this year's 16 Days of Activism is being celebrated under the theme, Count Me In.
Marching for their rights, this year's theme, Count Me In, is aimed at challenging men and boys to stand up and protect their female counterparts.
We think enough is enough. Then now we have to stand up as a man and then protect the women and children. Yes.
Meanwhile, members of society and authorities have also encouraged girls to break silence around abuse.
There must be a thorough research needed to go to the root of the problem. You know, the history of South Africa speaks for itself, especially before 1994.
Our role as Love Life is to teach young children and young women to know that there are physical abuse, sexual abuse, and emotional abuse.
So to the young women, we are saying that they mustn't allow men to be their blessers.
SID South Africa says it will hold a number of educational awareness campaigns. Tabiso Khadebe, SABC News, Botshabelo.
The Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, and the Science and Technology Minister, Naledi Pandor, says the future of prosperous African youth lies in science and innovation. They've urged young people to exploit many opportunities within those fields in order to bridge the gap between the rich and the poor. The pair addressed the Science Forum as a part of the Science Week underway in Pretoria.
The country's largest open science gathering, this year's theme igniting conversations about science, local and international scientists and students were among those attending. Delivering the keynote address as chairperson of the Human Resources Development Council of South Africa, Ramaphosa stressed the role of science in solving some of Africa's problems.
The many challenges we face, from pandemics and food insecurity and to poverty and climate change, require that there should be a concerted response from the global science community.
Minister Pandor concurs that science can contribute positively to tackling inequality and other socio-economic challenges facing Africa.
Science, technology and innovation have a very important contribution, in fact the key contribution to make to addressing our problems. But also we have very bad notions of Africa. Some of them are totally dishonest and don't reflect the continent we are part of.
Some use the platform to showcase South Africa's many scientific success stories. This book, titled What a Great Idea, narrates the country's scientific accomplishments. And authors such as these agree that science is the key to solving many of Africa's problems.
We cannot afford to devalue science, because science holds a solution to many of the problems that we're facing in Africa, including poverty and malnutrition and lack of education.
The 2017 forum is focused on promoting Pan-African corporations in science and technology and the role of innovation in promoting inclusive development. Patricia Fasahi, SABC News, in Pretoria.
The Minister of Energy, David Mashlobo, says government will not be coerced into abandoning plans to consider other sources of energy to diversify the supply of electricity. Now, he was speaking at the two-day energy indaba underway in Johannesburg. The indaba is facing mounting criticism from several activists. More than 20 non-governmental organizations have written to the minister voicing their dissatisfaction about the event.
A small group of environmental and rights activists braved the gloomy weather to protest outside Gallagher Estate where the indaba was held. They say the meeting appears to have ulterior motives. The group has also accused Minister Mashlobo of attempting to fast-track the nuclear build program. Inside, the president gave a keynote address emphasizing that energy security is a catalyst for economic growth.
We want to ensure that we never experience an energy shortage again in our country. In this regard, we will continuously invest in power generation, transmission, and distribution infrastructure. We are pursuing our energy security master plan. We are looking at an energy mix that includes coal, solar, wind, hydro, gas, and nuclear energy.
Minister Mashlobo says nuclear will be rolled out at a pace that the country can afford.
When government comes to implementation of projects, we will use the question of pace, scale, affordability, and environmental consideration as a mantra to implement any program.
Analyst Chris Yelland says government has to fast-track rolling out the integrated resource plan.
The whole issues are facing the integrated resource plan for electricity and the energy mix in South Africa, and that includes the nuclear decision and the nuclear new build. Up to now, we haven't got any clear signals about the IRP or about the nuclear new build, and I think the country is waiting to hear these things.
The indaba continues. Diabo Seto, SABC News, Johannesburg.
Across our borders now, the High Court in Harare, Zimbabwe, has released ousted Finance Minister Ignatius Chombo on bail. Now this ahead of his trial on corruption charges following his arrest at the height of last month's military takeover. His release comes as the new Finance Minister, Patrick Chinemasa, presented the first budget since Robert Mugabe resigned. Chinemasa called for strict fiscal discipline.
Zimbabwe's economy is facing unprecedented challenges on all fronts. The country's infrastructure has deteriorated. And as part of addressing these challenges, Zimbabwe's finance minister made changes to the current economic policies.
This bill will amend the Indigenization and Empowerment Act in order to bring into effect the following. In the extractive sector, that is the mining, the proposed amendments will confine the 51-49% indigenization threshold to only 2 minerals, namely diamond and platinum. These are in the extractive sector. The 51-49% threshold will not apply to the rest of the extractive sector, nor will it apply to other sectors of the economy, which will be open to any investor regardless of nationality.
He has also raised concerns about government expenditure at a time where the country is facing economic challenges.
We are concerned with fiscal indiscipline, and government will therefore need to embrace and adhere to the following fiscal angles. We need to manage the budget deficit for 2018 at below 4% of GDP. We need to reduce the public debt to GDP ratio to a sustainable level of not more than 70%. We need to cap government borrowing from the central bank to at most 20% of the previous year's government revenues. We need to raise on infrastructure, spending on infrastructure to 15% of total expenditure in 2018 from the current 11%. We also need to reduce the share of employment costs as a share of total revenue to 70% in 2018 from 86%, which is currently the case.
China and Zimbabwe signed loans and grants valued at more than $200 million in Harare yesterday. A special envoy was sent to Zimbabwe just days after the inauguration of Emmerson Mnangagwa to strengthen the relations between the two countries.
The Chinese government has been committed, just like the special envoy who came a couple of days ago, actually, who said that China is going to continue committed to assist our good friend and brother in its development through thick and thin ever since Zimbabwe's liberation struggle. We want to strengthen this good relationship and expanding our cooperation in all the sectors.
President Mnangagwa has made a commitment to rebuild the country's economy. Sophie Mkweli, SABC News, Johannesburg.
And further afield, the militant group Hamas has urged Palestinians to abandon peace efforts and launch a new uprising against Israel. Now this in response to the US President Donald Trump's recognition of Jerusalem as its capital. Palestinian factions called for a day of rage on Friday today, and on Thursday, yesterday, a wave of protests in the West Bank and Gaza brought clashes between Palestinians and Israeli troops. Medics said that at least 31 people were wounded by the Israeli gunfire and rubber bullets. The Israeli military said on Thursday evening that 2 rockets had been fired towards Israel from the Hamas-ruled Gaza Strip, but did not cross into Israel territory. The military said it was reinforcing troops in the occupied West Bank.
A new day in Jerusalem, and for some, one they'd been hoping for.
Historic, definitely historic. We've been waiting for it for a long time.
We're very excited. I think it's a fantastic event. It's been long coming. Jerusalem is de facto been our capital for many, many years, and we're happy to have the recognition.
But in nearby Bethlehem, Palestinians switched off Christmas lights at Jesus' traditional birthplace. It was a dark night too in the city of Ramallah, where the lights on the Christmas tree next to the burial site of Palestinian leader Yasser Arafat were also switched off. In the West Bank and Gaza, Palestinians took to the streets chanting anti-Trump slogans and burning tires. They burned pictures of Trump and US flags and vowed retaliation. In Lebanon, Palestinian refugees took to the streets in protest too. Lebanese President Michel Aoun said Trump's Jerusalem decision was dangerous and puts back the peace process by decades, threatening not only regional stability but global stability as well. The Australian government said it was committed to a two-state solution.
And we will not be taking steps to move our embassy. It will continue to offer diplomatic representation in Tel Aviv.
Indonesian President Joko Widodo urged the United Nations to step in, saying the unilateral decision could disturb world peace. The Syrian government said the decision will constitute a precedent in international relations, which may have dangerous consequences.
Now, time to do some housekeeping, and let's take a look at our picture of the day, which comes from Venetia Mao. And I would say, Google Palestine. But last time I checked, it wouldn't even show it on the world maps. Peace, love, compassion, and justice. And there you see that picture, Free Palestine. Malcolm X, Albert Einstein, Nelson Mandela, Mahatma Gandhi, and that one there from Nelson Mandela that reads, "We know too well that our freedom is incomplete without the freedom of the Palestinians." Malcolm X says, the Zionist argument to justify Israel's present occupation of Arab Palestine has no intelligent or legal basis in history, not even in their own religion. Albert Einstein says, it would be my greatest sadness to see Zionists, Jews, to do Palestinian Arabs much of what the Nazis did to the Jews. Mahatma Gandhi says, Palestine belongs to the Arabs in the same sense that England belonged to the English, or France to the French, or Zimbabwe to Zimbabweans. It is wrong and inhuman to impose the Jews on the Arabs. There you have historical fact of people believing that Israel belonged to the Arabs. What do you say? Let me know what's on your mind. Now, our comment of the day comes from Evode Dear, South African journalist. It reads, "We want details of the hashtag Steinhoff fraud, in-depth analysis with illustrations like you did with Nkandla. Hashtag." Now remember that we had a couple of interviews already. We were supposed to host Professor Raymond Parsons today, but unfortunately he can't make it today. But we will discuss the Steinhoff issue on Tuesday with in-depth analysis. And that is why, of course, we're asking you that question on the question today. What do you make of the Steinhoff debacle? Let's take a quick look at what you are telling us in the meantime about that question on the Twitter handle at SABC Newsroom. Let's take a quick look, if we can have it up and running within a second. Let's see if we can put it up. Let's put it up. There we go. Mlungesi says, "It's a good thing because they are whites whom you scared of," as SABC. If it was Zuma or the Guptas, the SABC today would be full of stooges. Well, that's your thought, Mlungesi. We always highlight the stories that comes to mind here on SABC. We're not scared. Mlungisi there. Keep them coming. We'll read them as we continue. But in our courts today, let me remind you, here in Gauteng, the former state prosecutor and now DA Member of Parliament, Glenys Breitenbach, will appear at the Pretoria North Magistrates Court again today on charges related to her shredding work-related documents from her work laptop. In October, she told the court that she had only deleted files from her NPA work laptop to protect her privacy. Breitenbach was suspended from the NPA in 2012. Now, she believes her suspension was in a bid to stop her from prosecuting the former police crime intelligence head, Lieutenant General Richard Ndluli, amid political interference. Still in Gauteng, a foster mom who burnt and poured paraffin over a 13-year-old girl before setting her alight in an effort to teach her a lesson for stealing money will appear in the North Gauteng High Court today. Nelly Masangu died a few days later in hospital, and her aunt, Anna Mashlangu, was subsequently convicted of murder in the High Court in Pretoria. Schlangwert pleaded not guilty to the 2015 murder, and she said that she did not have the intention to kill her. In the Northwest, security measures are expected to be intensified in and around the Mahikeng High Court sitting in Mohwashe in the Northwest, where a pre-trial hearing of the 14 Marikana residents is to be heard this morning. The 14, including activist Napoleon Webster, are facing murder charges following the death of Petrus Charlie Sabata. Sabata was hacked to death with pangas and spears 4 years ago near the RDP housing section of Marikana in the Rustenburg district. The incident happened amidst the unrest in the area after the supply chain manager of the RDP housing project was accused of allocating new houses to people from outside. Now, we will keep you updated with developments on these cases during this program. You have to stay tuned. We'll take a short break. We'll be back right after that. We are talking about matric students, struggling grade 11 pupils who are pushed through the class of 27. They will be able now to rewrite their exams in modules. We'll speak about that. That's our theme for this morning. We're back. Struggling grade 11 pupils pushed through the class of 2017, earlier I said 27, it's 2017, are now able to write their matric examinations over 2 years. That proposal to allow these progressed pupils, now progressed pupils are those who failed grade 11 twice, but were nevertheless promoted to grade 12. They are now allowed to write the first half of their examination in December and the remainder the following June, appeared in the newly gazetted draft amended policy on the conduct, administration and management of the senior certificate. The progressive student movement says that they have serious concerns over the subject modularization. Now, for more on this, we are joined from our Pretoria studios by the president of the progressive student movement, Kabelo Ntsikiso. A very good morning to you, Kabelo, and welcome.
Morning, and morning to the viewers as well.
First and foremost, I would like to test your response to the change to allow those struggling grade 12 pupils to be able to now write their matric examination over 2 years.
No, look, as progressive student movement, we have made submissions starting from last year in November to the Department of Basic Education that the approach will not assist the learners in any way. Remember, we are sitting now with a report of a progressive in reading literacy, which says that grade 4 pupils are struggling. But then we have the Department of Basic Education that will then progress those learners up until they reach matric. When they reach matric, they struggle a lot in terms of catching up and whatsoever, which then leads to the Department of Basic Education modularizing the subjects, suspending 3 subjects to next year and allowing them to write this year. Well, our submission on that matter was that what then should those learners do the whole of next year until they write the examination? Besides, what is the use of those learners attending school for the whole year to even write a 3 examination? Why is the department prophesying over the result of these learners? Why don't they allow them to write? And if they fail, they'll give them a second chance next year. And if they pass with unconvincing results, they can then upgrade. Further, we said to the Department of Basic Education that the entirely problem here is not a matter of learners adapting. Remember, we have a lot of children in South Africa who are not the same as children. We have children who are academics and we have children who are intellectual, who are given skills. We said to the Department of Basic Education, instead of introducing this frivolous policy, let us have a comprehensive educational approach that will be divided into 2, the academic part and the skill development, which is the technical part, which will then allow learners to have skill to possess after school. So this thing of them writing this year and writing next year will not make any difference. We'll just subject our learners to being quantities instead of making quality learners. The educational system on its own is a failure. Even if they write this and write next year, there will be no difference. What we need here is a change of the educational system to enforce a skill-driven educational system across the board.
Well, you call it frivolous, but the modularization of the curriculum, what is the issue with it? Because some would argue that it is more accommodating to those struggling students who can't get through.
Let me get you through this. Even if those learners, they are struggling, even if they are going to give them a second chance to write, still, what's going to happen to those learners after school? That's our concern as Progressive Student Movement. What will happen to those learners after school? This is a system that prepares learners to be job seekers after school instead of entrepreneurs. So what our submission is that instead of providing this frivolous policy, the Department of Basic Education and the government of South Africa must implement a comprehensive education approach that will allow these particular learners who are struggling to have a skill development from a foundation base, so that when they fail to go to tertiaries and stuff like that, they can use their skill to make a living out of it. That's what we propose as Progressive Student Movement. We can go out, we can blame the curriculum, we can blame the teachers, we can blame the parents, we can blame everyone. But the problem doesn't revolve around those things. The problem revolves around the failing system of the Department of Basic Education. We are not all academics in South Africa. That's what you need to know. We need a skill-driven curriculum that is going to prepare our learners to be able to extract, convert, and finish the minerals that are in our country, so that we can even improve the economy.
Now, talking about that, I don't know if you've seen, but we are conducting a poll today, and that poll speaks specifically to an issue that starts at grassroots level. And when I talk grassroots, I'm talking about grades 0 to 4, because 80% of our grade 4 learners can't read. And we are asking the question to our viewers today, who's to be blamed? And you spoke about it, the current curriculum, the teachers and the parents. And I tell you, 232 votes in, 48% are suggesting that the current curriculum is the problem. 28% says the teachers and 24% says it's the parents. So with this particular modularization, what implications do you think it will have on those potential university students as well as potential job seekers?
Listen, this thing is going to delay the learners at large. Because remember, if I'm told that I'm going to write 3 subjects next year when I was supposed to write all subjects this year, that means I won't stand a chance to go to tertiary. I should wait up until I write the 3 subjects next year, and then from there, I should wait for next year to apply for tertiary education. That's useless. We can't have these kind of things. Even if they pass, like I said, even if they pass this year and pass the subjects next year, they are still going to be subjected to being high paramas. They're going to sit at home doing nothing, because this is the system that subjects them to be job seekers instead of employers. So we cannot allow the modularization, we cannot allow anything that is possessed through this system. What we need is to decolonize this system, bring upon an African curriculum that is driven by the skill development phase. That's all we submit as progressive student movement.
Now, that skill-driven curriculum that you are proposing, have you engaged the department on this particular issue and the proposal that suggests that that should change?
Look, we engaged the department since from last year in November. We wrote to them, we met them. In May, on the 12th of May, it was Friday, 2017, we met the HODs of the Department of Basic Education. We gave them a document with the challenges and the solution as per we think that they can do those things. They never responded to us because there was a mandate somewhere that says that they must not meet the leaders of progressive student movement. We therefore wrote to the Nelson Mandela Foundation to request a commission that will look into the Department of Basic Education, the curriculum and the system. We never received a feedback from them. We therefore wrote to the Office of the Presidency that they should establish a commission that will look directly on the challenges of basic education. Up until now, we're still waiting for the response. What we know is that the Department of Basic Education doesn't respond to you until you media capture you. After media captures you, they are going to come to you running as if, we don't know, as if they've been responding to. They never responded to us. We've met them severally. We have engaged them, no response from them, no response from the presidency, no response from Nelson Mandela Foundation. So we are standing here, we are static. We don't know what to do now as progressive student movement besides taking the gloves off, because last time we said we're going to deal with this thing in a legal manner, but then the legal processes takes time, which now take us back to going to the ground, consolidating on our ground, and ensuring that parents, learners, teachers, as well as all the stakeholders of basic education come together and force this thing out of the Department of Basic Education. If the citizens of Zimbabwe did that to Mugabe, we can do that to the Department of Basic Education. Nothing can stop us.
Now, it seems that the problem starts really at a lower grade, to grade 4, because as we indicated earlier on our poll, 80% of our grade 4 learners can't even read. So, do you think that this will probably wake up the Department of Basic Education to make sure that at least our people can read, our learners at school?
Look, this must wake the Department of Basic Education up. Like I said, South Africa is not a theoretical, country across the board when coming to education. Not all the learners will be able to read. That's a fact. Not all learners will be able to capture what Adolf Hitler did, what is happening in English short stories and stuff like that. Most of our learners are having skills within themselves. They have poultry skills, farming skills, they have mining skills, they have many of skills you can think about. But because the Department of Basic Education doesn't give them a chance to showcase their skills, we're still going to have this kind of challenges moving forward. Because we cannot expect, even simply, we cannot expect those learners to be able to read when the teachers themselves are lazy to teach. The teachers themselves behaving like university lecturers, coming to class, giving learners notes and leaving classes. We're still going to have this kind of challenge. And if the Department of Basic Education doesn't want to listen to us and the submission we gave to them and the solutions, then we're going to have a problem moving forward, because they will keep on progressing our learners, progressing. When they reach matric, they fall victims of the system and become just a bunch of children of South Africa who depend on social grants. We cannot allow the citizens of Azania to depend on social grant on our land, because the Department of Education and the government refuses to give us what we demand, skill development.
Kabelo, I thank you so much. We need a lot more time to discuss this. We're going to bring you back to discuss this even further. That was the president of the Progressive Students Movement, Kabelo Ntsakiso. But right now, as we speak, the suspended head of the Gauteng Health Department, Dr. Bani Silabano, is again expected to conclude his testimony at the SABC arbitration hearings in Parktown, Johannesburg this morning. Let's go there live.
Again, some of the issues that have already been addressed, bearing in mind again that this is his witness, which he had the right to lead in the first instance. I would ask that you make a ruling that the cross-examination be limited to new matter or different points that need to be made, and that we should not allow a rehashing of issues which have been traversed a number of times. Cross-examiners very often do not like the answers that witnesses give to questions, but there does come a time where you're stuck with the answer, you're stuck with the evidence, then you can argue at the end of the day, is it credible, has it any weight, is it truthful, whatever. But the answers are there, and I can't think of anything really that is going to come out that is new in this matter, which is going to be of guidance to you or assistance to you in determining the disputes which you identified when I first addressed you when the witness started to testify. So I would ask that you direct that the cross-examination be on a limited scale so that we can complete the cross-examination of my client, essentially because he has traversed most issues that you can conceive of. If there's something new, obviously, then my learned friend can pursue that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you. Thanks. Let's start with get responses from various counsel. Ms. Stein.
Thank you, Justice. Justice, this is something that, of course, we will leave to you, but perhaps just to highlight that one of the purposes of these proceedings is to search for the truth, search for an explanation for the families, and get the information that they have been denied for more than 2 years to this point. We trust, Justice, that any unfairness in the cross-examination, it's with respect to your role to protect the witness, but that can't happen. It should not happen at the expense of the families getting the explanations that they seek. Dr. Celebano, we appreciate that he has been here for a long period of time. We appreciate that he has been answering the questions that have been posed to him. And we would support an approach that would conclude the cross-examination in a manner that allows the families to get that full explanation.
But Mr. Cook is surely right that no amount of repetition would improve the ability to resolve the dispute between the parties.
Of course, Justice, to the extent that there is repetition, that doesn't take the objective of explanations and information much further. But to the extent that there are different angles to cover, that in our submission is necessary for the matters to proceed.
What do you say to your submission that a party may not cross-examine its own witness?
Justice, this is an arbitration sui generis, as we have said on a number of occasions. It is regulated by the procedure that's been agreed to between the parties to the arbitration. It has been the approach that has been adopted in relation to other witnesses as well. I think that Mr. Hutama would be able to deal with that point in more detail than I can. But just to highlight that the terms of reference make clear that the parties have agreed on the process for the arbitration.
The point that Mr. Cook makes that may be a good point is also that quite often counsels seek a particular answer and they press on and press on. And I've often said, you are bound by that answer now. Move on. Isn't it so?
Justice, in those instances, your role with respect is to protect the witness from that kind of repetitive questioning. And we would support that going forward.
Very well. Thank you, Ms. Stein. Ms. Krause.
Thank you, Justice. To the two issues that were raised, the first is whether a person can cross-examine their own witnesses. We've dealt with this at this hearing before, and it lies within a person to cross-examine the witness that he subpoenaed. The second question, I have to agree with my learned friend, Ms. Stein, that it's your role to protect the witness.
it will be a sad day for you to make a blanket decision now. I trust that my learned friend for the state does not want to repeat everything that was said in cross-examination, but in order for him to properly lift out the issues that he wants to lift out, he must be given leeway in that regard. But of course, a witness must not be hammered and be abused. So, and we leave that entirely in your hands, that will not happen, as it has not happened before in these proceedings. Thank you, Justice.
Thank you. Advocate, you are here and welcome.
Thank you very much,
It
Justice.
was not long at all.
Thank you for the indulgence.
Yes.
Justice, we don't have any specific remarks that we would like to make. In general, we would just like to say that we think it's the right of each and every counsel to cross-examine the witness. Whether or not that question raised by a counsel has been raised by another counsel, we submit that that must be allowed as a general rule in these proceedings for a number of reasons. Each and every counsel, each and every party has their own line of questioning and a reason for asking that question. So as a general principle, we submit that a counsel should not be limited to asking questions, to not ask questions that's already been asked by other counsel. To the extent that the argument has been made that Dr. Silibano is a witness of the state, that he cannot be cross-examined by the state, I'll leave it up to my learned colleague to address you on that specific issue.
Yeah. Of course, at the same time, repetition for its own sake advances nothing.
Indeed, sir.
In resolving a dispute between the parties.
Indeed, sir, Justice.
Yeah. Advocate Nguchana.
Thank you, Justice Msaneke. In relation to that is the first issue, that an issue should not be repeated time, and that is a question should not be repeated time and again. You have repeatedly throughout the proceedings guided the parties, informed us that we are bound by the answer that the witness provide. I think to that extent, in my view, you have executed your duty, and now you have been invited to make a ruling on whether you had executed your duties or not as presiding officer. In my view, that has been done. So, insofar as there are repetitive questions, yes, it is fair. I think the concern is fair. That has occurred, I think, from all of us here. I think we should take heed and so that we can expedite these proceedings and not repeat questions. That has happened, and that accounts for, I think, some of the delay with this witness, Justice Msaneke. And the second issue, whether the state can cross-examine Dr. Silibano, who happens to be their employee, Justice, we are guided by the terms of reference. The terms of reference are clear on that. We can't depart from that. We have been conducting ourselves within the four corners of those terms of reference. That is one. That is, in order to explain this, I think once and for all, I think finally, that it is the agreement of the parties that a witness may be called. Then it is the decision of the party that calls that witness whether to lead that witness. If the party decides not to lead that witness will be led by evidence leaders. So if the witness is led by an evidence leader, it is open to whoever called that witness to be cross-examined by that party. So there is nothing peculiar with it. It's in line with the terms of reference, Justice Msaneke. We do know the general principles and the general rules in relation to that, but the terms of reference, we decided that we are going to conduct ourselves in this fashion. So the concern, in my view, which is valid, is repetition. We should avoid asking repetitive questions. Thank you, Justice.
Very well. Advocate Witamu.
Good morning, Justice.
Good morning.
I must indicate that the concerns which has been raised have been noted, but what has come out from the witness is that On every 10 when he was cross-examined by different counsel, there's been different answers which have been provided, which somehow necessitated the repeat of some of those questions. However, I do take note of the fact that we should not just repeat questions for the sake of making a point. And on that score, like I'll accept that we should avoid putting repetitive questions if the question has been answered very clearly. On the second aspect of cross-examination.
And that's good practice, isn't it?
Indeed.
Procedural practice.
Indeed.
If the witness gives an answer and you don't like it, you could probe a little, but if the answer stands, you're bound by the answer.
Indeed.
What remains becomes an argument on credit, isn't it?
Yes. As I was saying, that like it will depend on the type of answer that the witness will have provided. If more than once he has given the same answer, there's no point to persist with that question. But if an occasion has arisen that there are different answers, then that question will then have to be repeated so that it can be cleared.
Sure.
It was on that basis that the questions were put. And as I say, I do concede that we should not repeat for the sake of doing so. On the second aspect, without being repetitive, I cannot add more than what my learned colleagues have said about the procedure adopted with regard to the cross-examination of witnesses. And then, thank you.
That's fine. Mr. Cook, naturally I would have had your colleagues first, and you have a right of reply, to the initial submissions, having heard your other learned colleagues. Is there anything you want to add on your invitation that I make a ruling?
Very briefly, Justice, the basis for the ruling is not the procedure. I said when I addressed you that I know what the answer is, so you don't have to worry with that. The basis is repetition, and I would ask you to make a ruling on that score. Thank you.
Thank you. All counsel before me are very alive to undesirability of repetition. I think every one of them has noted the point. And you have been here for days, asked counsel to move on every time they didn't like the answer. If you don't, it simply means the answer is different from your expectation. You accept the answer, having probed, and you move on. And two, you're quite right, and indeed all of them acknowledge repetition for its own sake takes us nowhere. But I don't think I'm inclined to make any ruling. I think counsel should observe proper practice, and by and large they have. And it's been my job to make sure that they do. There has been repetition on occasions, and I think everybody's alive to the fact that we ought not to have undue repetition. But certainly I won't restrict anybody. And you know the answer about the other matter. Parties had a pre-arbitration hearing conference, and there's a pre-arbitration minute. All arbitrations, as you know, are conducted within the four corners of the agreement between the parties. Provided the agreement is not unlawful, the arbitrator is bound by that arrangement. And that's the arrangement of evidence leaders, and parties would then cross-examine in order to reach and achieve some of the objectives of the arbitration around equitable redress. So I'm afraid the state is entitled to continue the cross-examination, and I'll not make a ruling that they are limited in any way. But certainly, where there's repetition, I will intervene in favor of fairness to the witness. Thank you. You remain under your oath to tell the truth and nothing but the truth.
Yes.
Advocate
Yes,
Utamo. Yes.
Good morning, Dr. Selebano.
Morning, Counsel.
Thank you for once again making the time before these proceedings.
Thank you, sir.
During the past days, you have made quite a number of concessions about the failure of the implementation of the marathon project. Do you recall that?
Yeah, on some, you are not specifying them, but
Well,
in
like
general,
I'm trying to avoid having to repeat those aspects which were highlighted as failures in the implementation of the project.
okay, in a general sense, yes.
That the project has not been a success in its implementation.
Yes, there were failures in the implementation.
Yeah. And for quite some time, like you have mentioned that you take accountability for all those failures. Do you recall that?
As the accounting officer, yes.
As the accounting officer. Will that also entail you taking responsibility as the head of the department?
No, I would say the disciplinary hearing will make that determination.
So is there a difference between you taking accountability and you taking responsibility of the consequences attended to the failures of the implementation of the project?
By definition, there's a difference between accountability and responsibility.
So for now, you are not taking responsibility?
That's why, yes, I'm saying the disciplinary hearing will ventilate that.
Would you clarify the difference between responsibility and accountability?
In broad terms, accountability, you saying as an accounting officer, whatever happened under my watch, irrespective of I knew, I did it, or I didn't do it, would have to come to me because it was under my watch. But then at the level of responsibility, I'm giving it in broad terms, would be when you are actually doing the actual deed itself yourself, and you are responsible for the running of what you were doing, then you have to take responsibility at that level. I can give an example, Judge, if you want.
Yes,
if you as judge was to send me to the airport to go and give somebody important documents, and he's catching a 2 o'clock flight, and give me enough time to go there, and I then decide that I'll go and have lunch and play around, and I don't deliver that, you might take accountability because I'm responsible to you in that sense. But in terms of really then being directly responsible for not giving the said person the message, you might say no, but I've done everything. I give him a car, I gave him the documents at 11 o'clock for 2 o'clock. He chose to go to the airport at 2 o'clock.
So you think accountability is the same thing as vicarious liability, do you?
Judge, I don't know, but in medicine, I know the National Health Act, when it talks about vicarious liability, please forgive me on that one, I'm just telling you how I know it, is that they say, as a doctor, if I sit and do an operation, as an example, and something goes wrong there, and I wouldn't have done anything beyond what I know in terms of my skills, but something went wrong. The state might take vicarious liability, saying you did that in whatever you did that for the state, and you didn't go all out on yourself knowingly. The difference would be, I'm not a surgeon, I don't know anything about operations, then suddenly I want to perform an operation. Then the state can't take vicarious liability. That's how I understood it.
You saying you have done nothing wrong, but you accept accountability because you are the head of the department.
That's correct. And I can't walk away from it.
So your attitude is your conduct was blameless, but you take accountability because you were the head of the department.
The head of the department. You can't walk away
I just want to
from
understand your concepts, that's all.
Yes.
I'm not blaming or anything, I just understand what you mean by. So you don't admit or accept that you did anything wrong, but you say you are accountable because you were the head of the department.
That's
Is that
correct.
it?
That's correct. I understand it in that way.
You understand it that way?
Yes.
And as for responsibility, do you have any?
That's why I was saying.
Are you responsible for any of these misdeeds?
That's what I'm
More
saying.
precisely, the wrongful and reckless and unlawful conduct which occurred within the Marathon project. Are you responsible for anything there?
I would say no until and I would allow the disciplinary hearing to ventilate that.
And that's your honest view that you are not responsible for any of the missteps in the implementation of the Marathon project related to life as a domain?
That's my honest view, that the missteps happened under my watch.
No, I'm taking responsibility now.
No,
We started first with accountability and we are done. Understand?
Yes, you understand.
You're saying I'm accountable because I'm the head of the department. Yeah. The second part is responsibility on your definition. And you say you are not responsible for any of the unlawful and negligent conduct
I would say yes.
that happened in the Marathon project.
I would say yes.
Counsel?
Thank you, Justice. Dr. Silvano, if you can try and locate before you a document LR 311. It's an interview that you had with the Ombud.
Yes. 311. It's no longer there. Give me an idea.
Have you managed to get the document?
No. I think I have it.
Please turn to page 22 of the transcript of the interview that you had with the Ombud.
Okay.
From the interview, you'll note that your response appears at page 22, where it's recorded Dr. Tiago Selebano. Do you see that?
I can see that.
Can you just read for the record what did you convey to the Ombud, like when you had the exchange with him?
I conveyed that I should take the responsibility, and that's why I say
can you just read it for the record?
You want to start to know the pressure?
Yes. Well, like, if I can just make it easy for you, I'm going to read it for you. You said, no, the pressure on the staff became such that they, and I'll take the sword for that, because you know, when you are not there for your staff and things go wrong, you cannot blame the staff. As the head of administration, I should take the responsibility, and that is why I say I will take the sword for them. They be saved, I can rather walk, because the pressure became so much on them. What did you mean when you conveyed to the Ombud that you'll take responsibility?
In that sense, I actually meant that I take accountability. If you read it in full, says exactly what I've been saying, that I was not there for the staff. So I was not there for the staff.
Please turn to page 24. Also in your exchange, line 11. Do you see that?
That's right.
Where you have said that, you know, as the head of the department, I will take responsibility even though I was not responsible for this 10 because it is an administrative issue. Do you see that?
I can see that.
Do you recall giving the evidence that the decision to terminate the contract was your own decision as it was an administrative decision which did not require the approval of the MEC?
I think we've agreed on that yesterday.
Yes.
Yes.
So what responsibility were you alluding to when you said you'll take responsibility in this regard?
It was in spoken language, but I was alluding to exactly what I said, that you would distinguish responsibility and now accountability. And I said, I was not there for the staff, meaning even when they were doing all these things, I was not there. But the accountability lies with me. I cannot walk away and suddenly pretend as if, oh, it is the staff, it is their problem. No. I, as the head of the department, I take accountability there.
Okay, thank you. From your use of the two words, accountability and responsibility, can you just explain to the audience before you, to what extent do you, as the head of the department, take accountability and responsibility in respect of the unfortunate loss of lives of the mental health care users?
I'm saying I take accountability, as the judge did say, you are the captain of the ship. And I said, yes, I'm the captain of the ship. If anything goes awry in that ship, whether I was at the back of the ship, it's immaterial. I am the guy who is captaining the ship, so I take that accountability.
You know, talking about ships, a week ago, an Italian captain who left the ship before his passengers. Did you read about that?
I know about that. Costa Concordia, is that the one?
Yes.
Yes.
You know what happened to him?
He ran away when the ship was sinking.
Yes, recently he ran away. And recently, before a tribunal, what do you know what happened to him?
No, I haven't been up to date. All I know is that Captain Skitino something, when he was told, Captain, go back to the ship, go back to the ship, he was already outside and he said, I'm not going there.
You know how many years he was sentenced to prison?
No.
No?
No,
you can Google that during tea time.
Okay, I'll check that.
But he had done nothing to drown the people, but he was the captain of the ship. And he has to take all steps necessary to protect the lives of those under his command. And he did not do so. How does all that example I've given you now fit into your use of responsibility and accountability?
As I would know, in the same example, Captain Skitino was told, do not sail towards that area. The rocks, there are too many rocks there, and it will ground the ship. He deliberately and knowingly, ignoring everybody's advice, even the advice around people with him, he went and did that. He knowingly knew that what he was doing is wrong.
And what about this captain, Dr. Silibano?
You didn't... unless I'm given a chance to respond.
Let's not have any heckling. We're having quite a serious discussion, actually. Probably the most important part of
I'm
Dr.
saying,
Silvano's evidence, yes?
knowingly, there was no way that I would have known and sat there and deliberately hatched a plan to lose
No,
lives.
but was this captain warned?
Yes, by his own team. His own team. In this case, it would be like Manamela, and everybody came to me and said, don't do it. Then I still went on to do it. That would be a big distinction, Justice.
But was Captain Silibano warned that this ship might get into trouble if we proceed?
There were discussions from, yes, okay, let me put it, let me not waste time. There were, like I considered, there were, signs. But we missed the signs.
That is where the repetition comes from, you realize.
We missed the signs.
This council might have to go over again and show you what your evidence was. Yeah. So when a captain is alerted to impending risk and does not take steps to prevent it, should he or she be held accountable, you think?
Accountable, yes.
Should he or she be held responsible?
That's why I'm saying I'll ventilate that in a disciplinary hearing where we can look.
No, we're talking theoretically. Should it happen in your view? I'm not talking about you. In your view, should a captain like the one we've talked about, the Italian captain, be held?
The difficulty with that example, Justice, is that Schettino knew exactly what he was doing. He knew exactly what he was doing. Without doubt, he knew. I followed it almost every day.
And you?
I didn't know exactly that the outcome in implementation is going to be this. I didn't know that. I wouldn't have known the outcome.
Didn't know or didn't want to know?
No, I didn't know.
Counsel.
Thank you, Justice. Can you please turn to page 64 of that record? If you can start at page 63, I beg your pardon.
Right.
Yes, line 16. Professor Makhoba asked you the question, what do you regret most about this project? Do you see that?
That's right.
Please turn to page 64. I'm just going to read through the responses that you have given to the professor.
You had 16? Okay.
Turn to page 64.
Okay.
Line 5.
Line 5.
Your response was, you see, Professor, when I said with SADC and all those guys, and then the professor said, yeah. Then your response was that they raised, let me tell you, Professor, you know, this was a painful journey. I used to, well, parents will argue that we never spoke to them. Well, maybe at a one-on-one, yes. When we went to see the parents, I picked up that, you know, I remember at Randfontein, I was there. I was addressed. It was a Saturday morning. Then the professor then said, yeah, they told me about it. Then you continued at line 15. I came back very depressed, not because of anything. And I promised those people that, you know, I looked like I never fulfilled my promises. And that was the turning point for me, that I said, you know what? We will have to do this thing differently. We are going to throw, I told them, I said we are going to throw our own people into turmoil. Do you see that?
Yes.
Did you say that?
Yes, I said that, and I can explain exactly what I meant.
I'm not asking for an explanation
Okay.
now.
Yes, I said
You
that.
might be asked for that, but you said that.
I said that. I remember very well.
And then the exchange continued from line 22. Then you said, as you know, it is sad, Professor, because I saw it. We picked it up. I'll give an example of what I mean by turmoil.
That's right.
Families who stood up said, we hear you, but let us tell you about our lives with these patients. If you turn to page 65.
Did you say that? Oh, that is correct, yeah.
I said that, and I can explain that, yes.
And then you continued to say, and some of the patients, I mean, you realize that since they have been hospitalized, the patient, the families could not, the families could breathe better. And then the professor then said they could have a life. And then from line 5, then you continued to say, and we were not giving that guarantee to the families that you will still continue to breathe better. That is what changed it. And I knew that, no, we are doing it the wrong way. Because in a pursuit to do whatever and achieve what we want to achieve here, you have forgotten their families. Do you remember?
That's right.
Yes.
You said those words.
I said those words, and I can explain them nicely.
So, you were aware of these issues, and by SASOP in June of 2015.
No. We have gone through the letter by SASOP. I've given my view on the letter and what also transpired with the letter that I said I don't recall having it. Here, when I said what we're doing it the wrong way, and I explained it again previously. I said there were patients here and there are families here. What we're doing, we're looking more at what we want to do with the patients and not looking at what we are going to do for the families. The families were saying, if you do what you are going to do, what happens to us as families in terms of transport, in terms of distance? We're not giving them assurances ourselves. It has nothing to do with the fact that we're saying, and that's where I said, it makes me sad that as we speak with the patients, we're forgetting the part that we also have to deal with the families, and we're not doing that. That's what I meant.
You know, Doctor,
but that's the truth, Judge.
Why would the patients able to foresee the risk, the danger, and these outcomes that eventuated, and you could not? Why?
The families were saying, if you do it and leaving us out, because that the biggest weakness, we left the families out. We left the families. So we are concentrating on the patients only.
No, but you're not dealing with the question. They formed a family committee. They told you and your MEC, this will go wrong. They made representations to you and your MEC. These families toyed, they sent circulars, they gave you memoranda, besides all these clinicians. Why do you choose not to know that this project might have gone wrong?
I think
except to avoid disciplinary hearing. Why would you choose that? Why would they know they are not clinicians, they are not trained, they have more pressing circumstances? They could foresee it, and not you. Why?
I think, like I say, we missed the element, which was a terrible error. We missed the element of including the families in the decision.
No, but why don't you know the risk, the apprehension was so obvious?
Yeah, it was obvious.
And you pushed ahead, and you want to persuade all of us that you did not have the foresight, that things might go wrong.
In all honesty, I raised my hand, I didn't have the foresight.
Why?
I didn't have the foresight. I could.
But why did you have the foresight? I mean, you're not retarded. You're an MBCHB.
No, Prof.
You are an HOD. Families say, please don't move our people. A lot's going to go wrong. They form themselves up into an entity. They march. They have meetings with you. Why couldn't you see what they saw? And they don't have the benefit of your training.
No. Even the best of people do miss things. It happens, Justice. It happens. It has happened so many times in history. The best of them. It's not MBCHB, it's not anything. I didn't have the foresight at that time.
And when you joined Mr. Musinogi to write that submission to the MEC,
incidentally, it was
you list a number of risks, and you say you co-authored the letter.
Yes.
Why didn't that give you the foresight, a reasonable apprehension of harm to others? Why didn't you have that?
That's why I hear you. Incidentally,
no, but
it was after this
answer.
meeting.
I just want to hear what your answer.
I didn't have the foresight at that time.
Why did you not have it?
It's
what stood in your way to see the obvious?
I can't think of what is it that blinded me. I can't think of it.
Okay, sir.
Dr. Silibano,
Cancer?
We have had evidence, and I really don't want to take you through a lot of that evidence. But like what we have had is that most of these mental health care users were transferred to places which were more than 100 kilometers away from their families. Have you heard that?
I know that. I know. I got to know about it, yes.
How was that for the benefit or interest of those patients or their families?
And that's the aspect I'm saying, that as we're doing this, we're leaving the patients, the families outside.
Was it not that you, as the decision maker, at least at that time, and after such a meeting which you have described, that you really felt very sad, that you should have done something to deal with those issues?
But at that meeting, there wouldn't be issues of 100 kilometers for patients, isn't it? 100 kilometers for patients.
Did you know where were these patients going to be transferred to?
I knew that patients were going to be transferred to NGOs.
Do you know where were those NGOs located?
I mean, somewhere in the Val, somewhere in Pretoria, in the West End, yes.
Did you make any inquiry if those transferred to those mental health care users transferred to the NGOs would be closer to their families? Did you make the inquiry?
I didn't, because maybe you don't know. Not all patients who, as an example, who are at the Waverley, there are relatives who are staying around the West End. There are those who are coming from as far as Pretoria.
Okay. You having explained that you only take accountability, not responsibility, can you just explain if you have any regret or remorse in relation to the loss of lives of these mental health care users? And if so, what can you say to the families and all those who are affected by this tragedy?
Advocate Hutam, the toll that this has had on me and my family is also unbelievable. Let me explain. It is never, ever easy to explain the loss of a loved one. It doesn't matter whether it's one or as the families are here in large numbers. It's never easy. As a head, you don't want to preside over a department that then this type of thing happens to. In fact, the toll on me, and I didn't want to say this, was even that I got hospitalized. Because you can't live with this, and you say, like Justice was saying, what blinded me? What is it that I missed? Where did I lack courage if I lacked courage? It's so sad. I don't want to say this again, but maybe, the issue of remorse has been asked again, the emotions of remorse. Justice. My ailing mother sitting there, she can't move, she can't do anything. I stay with her. She even asked me, what happened? And she was even hospitalized. And every day she asks me, are you going to work? She's almost on a deathbed. I didn't want to talk about these things. And the pain that I feel is almost every day. Are you going to work? What do I say to her? Just to keep her happy, she said, I say, yes. I call her OC. I say, OC, yes, I'm going to work. Because when I look at her, I can see her pain to say, why would this happen to my son? And I can see that pain that the families are going through. It's an everyday experience for me. It's not easy. It's not at all. It's not easy. I'm sorry if I didn't answer you directly, but it's not easy. It's painful. You ask, your own kids ask you, what happened? You can't even answer. Because you can't explain death. You can't.
And all this happened under your watch?
I've said that.
Thank you. Thank you for making the time. There are no further questions to you, Doctor.
Thank you, Advocate. Thank you.
Advocate Guchan.
Thank you, Justice Msanek. Dr. Silebano, the MEC in a... I don't have much to ask you on. I just want you to comment on this.
Okay.
The MEC in an interview, the same as you, before Professor Mahoba, had indicated in relation to the warnings of the letter of 28 April 2015, we have gone through this. I don't want us to go back.
Which letter is that? Is that
yes, the letter from
SASOP?
Yeah, correct. And
okay.
There's another letter dated June 2015. That is pre-termination of the contract letters.
Is that the letter I wrote?
No.
Okay.
Where you were warned about this. Yes, exactly. We have indicated that we accept the contents of the letter. You accept that you were warned. And let's proceed, I think, from that understanding.
I don't mind, except there were many. Is that the one that the previous advocate just give me an idea?
Your passage was, your evidence was, I accept the contents of the letter and that there were warnings given to the department. Do you still remember?
Yeah, okay, yeah. Is that the letter from SASOP? Is that
correct,
the one? Okay.
Correct. And the MEC, when confronted with these ignored advices from these letters, indicated that, let me read from the Ombuds report on page 22.
I don't have it here with me.
It's volume 1. If you want to go through
perhaps it helps
the same
so
exercise.
That I know.
But it's not necessary for you.
It's not necessary,
yeah.
okay.
Do you want to look at it? If you do, we'll get Obakeng to help here, please.
He thinks, council thinks it's not necessary.
No, let's give you the opportunity to go through it. Volume 1, page 22.
I'm in page 22, Advocate.
Yes, there is the first bullet point on the
Yes.
left-hand side, and the second bullet point,
Yes.
that's where I want us to concentrate on.
That's right.
Says, in response to the ignored advice, she argued the concerns stroke advice of SASOP was sent to the HOD and Dr. Manamela, not directly to her. Otherwise, she would have addressed the issues, issued. She also argued that in all the meetings, none of the psychiatrists raised these concerns with her. Do you have any comment on that? The MEC now shifts the responsibility back on you, that you did not raise all these warnings, concerns raised with her. Otherwise, she would have stopped or addressed these problems.
Well, the weakness in that is that the letter was addressed to her. If she didn't read the letter, she can't say then. If I recall that letter, it was addressed to her.
Correct, it was CC'd, yes.
But on the other part where she says that psychiatrists were sitting with us, they were never saying anything. I think I did raise it also that indeed Dr. Madieche, Dr. Park, Dr. Prof. Musa, they were all sitting with us. And I think...
But they had written an earlier letter to make their position clear, isn't it?
Yeah, they were part and parcel of that, yeah.
So these issues were raised with the MEC. Did you, upon receipt of these concerns, yourself personally raise them again with the MEC?
Not at a personal level, no, I didn't.
Okay, thank you.
But what is your response to what the MEC says?
That I should have...
Yeah, you didn't apprise her fully, otherwise she would have known this and she would have stopped it.
Yeah, but you see, the thing is, Judge, the letter was written to her. If she had wanted any information ordinarily, why would she does this and say, there's a letter, can we discuss the letter? She didn't go that road.
But you agree that you did not inform her, keep her informed sufficiently.
On the letter was, when I hear what counsel is saying, she's saying the letter from SASOP, and I recall that letter when it was read to me by another counsel. It was referred to MEC, it was written to her. Now here she says, oh no, it was not written to me, it was written to the HOD. I think she makes that mistake there.
She makes the mistake.
Yeah.
And is she correct when she says, if you had apprised her fully of what was happening, her position would have been different?
Justice, when things are tough, the nearest thing that people like doing is to apportion blame. That's the quickest thing that we do. If you notice, I've really refrained from apportioning blame. It's the worst thing that you can do. Don't apportion blame. Take accountability for your own actions. Be fair.
Do you think the MEC is being fair?
I don't want to pass judgment on Justice, please.
Even at this late stage, you still seem scared to talk about the MEC. One club, wait.
She's not being fair. Huh? She's not being fair. She was not fair here.
Yes,
she should be fair.
You should be able to say at least that.
She should be fair.
Yes. That's a bare minimum.
That's a bare minimum.
You're entitled to say, I think she's not fair.
She's not being fair. You are right, Judge. In fact, I should apologize for that. You are right. She should be fair.
Yes.
Thank you. And in Mr. Masanoge's evidence in relation to the question that has been asked to you, why was the contract terminated? Mr. Masanoge discounted the cost issues raised, discounted the fact that there was no need for, that is for agency, and also indicated thirdly that Treasury did not, or the Auditor General did not advise you to terminate the contract. What do we have to say to that?
the difficulty, advocate, you have asked me a lot of critical...
It's a fair complaint. It's
so
a fair
I don't know.
Can we shorten it, Council?
Yeah.
Mr. Mesonor discounted the cost issues you had raised as a reason for the termination. And he had also discounted the concerns raised by the AG on the contract.
Can we stop there?
Yes.
Talk about finances first.
Yeah, I doubt if Mr. Musunuki can say that again.
Yes.
Knowing he wouldn't be, he's in planning, he's not in finance or budget, so, and he doesn't sit in AG's meetings, he doesn't sit at budget councils, so he wouldn't honest. Maybe he was making his own opinion, but he wouldn't know all those things. He wouldn't.
And, okay, no, it's fine. I'm not going to debate. I accept your answer.
And when the minister, national minister, says to us and to Parliament that you had the money to look after mental health care users, you seemed not to agree.
Yes, I found it very difficult because the facts that we had at the treasury, at the finance level in the department, and pointed to the opposite, that the system is in huge strain.
But let's tease that out a little bit. You know,
Yes.
You may not have had enough money for all the things you wanted to do. All that the minister says is that you had enough money to look after mental health care users. Maybe not for the Mercedes-Benz, maybe not for the salary increases, maybe not for the most modern equipment, but you had money to look after healthcare users. That's what the statement of the minister says. You had the money. Why do you differ with that?
I'm saying with the evidence that we have, I take it on the Mercedes, Justice, you're putting it lightly. On the evidence that we have, it was not that we have money for this and not money for that. The pressure, even now, the pressure was in the whole system. It was cracking the system. All the irons are up there. You must make sure there's food. As you battle with the food, the equipment is breaking up because we have not had enough money to fix it. As well, so it was a whole system thing. That's why I don't understand why would that be.
Let's try somebody else. Ms. Barbara Chris, who's MEC Finance. Advocate Krause reminded, comes out and says, yes, we have to save money, we have to have enhancement and so on, but never ever on the core duty to provide health care. And she assures us that has always been government policy.
That's correct.
We've canvassed this yesterday.
Yes, we did. It was advocate.
Advocate Krause raised that with. Do you disagree with that again, still?
No, you can't endanger services. Yes.
So you agree with MEC for Finance on that one?
That do what we've got to do, but be cognizant that you do not endanger health services.
And then Mr. Musinoki also in his note, that's where all this comes from, says we can postpone this thing. We can do it slowly. We can push it out. And money is not the issue. And you disagree.
No, I'm not disagreeing with Mr. Musinoki raised it, and it never worked, as we now know. It was my evidence that he did stand up, and I think other people have said it, that he did stand up.
The inevitable question is, once you decided to go on a money-saving trip, why did you choose the patients of Life Esidimeni? We've asked you this before.
Yes.
I just want to know again, what was the cogent reason for singling them out and saving money on them?
We singled the clinics patients, and then after that, and I think, Judge, if I may tell you, when you think we have done something and it has worked, because the clinics thing, we're able to really get it right, take all the patients, put them in our system, and we thought, oh no, it can work. The thinking at that time is that if we then take the patients, and I kept on saying even yesterday, the danger I face is that I come out as I'm defending the NGOs here, and I'm not, and I will never do that. Then we said, if we do this, we cut these costs there and there, we will then be able to take our psychiatrists, our psychologists from the ones that we have in different districts to supplement what has been done. So in our wrong thinking now, at that time, we thought we're going to maintain the same level of service. It was a wrong thinking. Now we know that.
Counsel.
Yeah, thank you, Justice Msaneke. Dr. Silvano, I think the issues have been sufficiently canvassed with you. I don't think there's any point raising them any further with you. Justice Msaneke, I'm not going to proceed.
You are done.
Thank you, Justice.
Can I say something?
We have a practice and a convention here to give whichever witness who might come here the final word. After all the questions and answers that have been given, we allow the witness to say her piece, his piece, in her or his own words, and to the extent of his or her heart's content. So after all of this, it's the opportunity to talk to me, to the family, to counsel, to your mother at home, and to the world.
Can I stand up? Is it allowed to stand up, Justice?
As long as you can get the mic, you feel that if you prefer and you're comfortable to stand up, please stand up.
I just wanted to stand up.
Just let somebody help you with the mic.
I think it will be fine. Yeah.
And you choose to stand up, right? Yes, indeed.
I'm standing up, Justice.
I'm sorry, shall we all be quiet, please, to allow this witness, as we have always done?
I'm standing up, Justice. But actually, I'm not standing up. I want to kneel in front of the families here and bow my head. When I'm bowing my head, it's not because I fear eye contact. In our way, when you bow your head, you show humility. I want to show humility to the families. I've not written a speech. I want to speak from the heart. I'm a young man who was born in Soweto. From the poorest of families that we all know. God was kind to me. He gave me the opportunity to go through school. I'm also a generation that also were activists.
I don't want to disturb you, but just lift your voice so that it actually reaches out. Yeah,
I'm of that generation. And Justice, during these days that I've been here, there's one thing that I've known and I've seen and I've observed. The families are very angry, justifiably so. The anger is even palpable. You can touch it, and the pain is there. You can even touch it. In fact, you ask the higher powers to say, when other families, when you go for lunch, and they use difficult words at you, you say, God, I understand why they're doing this. They're angry. We've let them down. And the pain that you carry as a young activist, you said, I want to get into a country that will take care of its own. But when this type of things happen, you question everything, and it actually embarrasses everything that you have always stood for. I told you, Justice, that I chose to come to the public sector. I wanted to serve. I wanted to serve. In fact, my first part was to join the army. I always believed that. I don't know whether the idealism was right or not. That when you are in the army, you will protect the Constitution. Maybe that's an idealism. And we know at our age now that the idealism has actually started going wrong. And I'm saying to the families, you have every right not even to forgive us. You've got every right to look angrily at us and say, we have lost our loved ones. Your loss is not a group loss. It's an individual loss. You sit at home, you don't miss a group, you miss your own mother.
That's the Life is a Domini arbitration process currently underway. But as we speak, the court case of NPA head, former NPA head, Mxolisi Mkasana, is currently underway on his fate, on whether he can return to the NPA, and of course the 17 million rand payout. Let's go there live.
The President's reasons, the record, and the President's affidavit. Starting with the President's reasons for the decision, the first observation is that the reasons that the President furnished were the reasons for the decision to enter into the settlement agreement. That is what was asked and furnished. The reasons furnished explain how it came about that Mr. Nxasana made the request to be allowed to vacate the office and why the President accepted the request. This questions the asserted severability, in fact, between the request and its acceptance and the settlement agreement. The second observation concerns the internal logicality of the version put up, and it flows from the following. The reasons commence by setting out that on 4 July 2014, the President, after consideration of all the evidence before him, had decided to institute an inquiry in terms of Section 12(6)(a) of the NPA Act. Then, during the period 4 July 2014 to 9 May 2015, the date on which Mr. Nxasana signed the settlement agreement, the President and Mr. Nxasana had various discussions regarding the discord that existed in the National Prosecuting Authority between Mr. Nxasana and senior management. This discord was pronounced, senior management divided, and the NPA destabilized. The looming inquiry contributed to the discord. Assuming that the grounds on which Mr. Nxasana made his request refer to the discord in the NPA, Mr. Nxasana must have made his request to vacate just before he signed the settlement agreement on 9 May 2015, since, according to these reasons, the discussions were held during the period 4 July 2014 to 9 May 2015. There are clear problems with this version. If the request was as late as that, then the negotiations concerning the financial settlement must have been had by then, because these were concluded by 9 May 2015. And then it is not possible that the request and its acceptance came first, unrelated to the financial settlement that came only afterwards. There could then not have been a separate earlier request as an incentive that emanated wholly and bona fide from Mr. Nxasana. But more importantly, generally, when the reasons furnished for a decision being reviewed do not fit the record of the decision being reviewed, then usually the decision maker's mere say-so does not survive. And that is the case here. Mr. Nxasana's attorney's letter of 10 December records that the President presented a settlement proposal to Mr. Nxasana and not the other way around. The letter expressly records that it has never been the NDPP's intention to resign from office because he regards himself as fit and proper for office. Mr. Ngasana had attempted to meet the president to discuss the inquiry that the president had announced, but without success. It was when Mr. Ngasana brought the application to interdict his being suspended that the president agreed to see him. But Mr. Ngasana made it clear in the letter that he will only consider the option of leaving office as the president would want him if he is fully compensated for the remainder of his contract. There is no scope here for a version that first came a request to vacate, accepted by the president, and having agreed that part, next commenced the negotiations for an exit package. Thus, the record of the decision as embodied in the correspondence, particularly the negotiations reflected there, and the subsequent decision to proceed with the inquiry, is not compatible with a request to vacate office having emanated from Mr. Ngasana at all, nor with the decision to resign being substantively unconnected with the reward recorded in the settlement agreement. The President's retort on 12 December 2014 that mediation would have to follow, and his response on 23 January 2015 that the inquiry would have to proceed, are likewise incompatible with an earlier standalone request to vacate having been made and accepted early in December 2014. Then Mr. Ngasana vacating his office would have been a fait accompli, and a mediation inquiry would have served no purpose. If the request to vacate only came later in 2015, in the run-up to the signing of the settlement agreement by Mr. Ngasana on 9 May 2015, then that is destructive of the version that the request to resign came first and was uncoupled from the financial negotiations. The reasons furnished for the decision to enter into the settlement agreement and the record of the decision are thus internally incompatible as concerns the central factual issue in this matter, namely whether there was a request incentivized by Mr. Ngasana emanating wholly and bona fide from him to be allowed to vacate office. We turn next to the President's answering affidavit. Part of the answer from paragraphs 5.3 to 5.8 follows the written reasons for the decisions closely, but the contents of paragraph 5.10 are different, and I quote, "There were extensive negotiations relating to the financial terms with which he would be agreeable to leave office, having made the request to do so. I was informed that there were offers made to Mr. Ngasana and counter-offers made by him around the amount he contended he was entitled to," close quotes. The answering affidavit does not say when and where the request to vacate was made by Mr. Ngasana, nor when and where it was accepted by the President. It is our view, particularly telling, that the request was not referred to in the contemporaneous written record of the decision to enter into the settlement agreement. The President suggests that the discord and the inquiry, threatened by the President himself, were the primary reasons advanced by Mr. Ngasana. Concerning the discord, the senior members who were implicated were Advocates Jiba Mkhwebe and Zinyati. The adverse findings that had by then been made against them in the courts were a matter of public knowledge. In respect of them, the Hofmeyr Memorandum had drawn attention to the need for disciplinary action to be taken against them, and Mr. Ngasana had himself ensured that the memorandum had reached the President. The President must have known about the judgments. Further, the Yakub Committee had been appointed and had found that Advocate Jiba Mkhwebe had a great deal to answer for. This conclusion had been given to the Minister by 27 February 2015, within the very time frame covered by the above paragraphs in the President's affidavit. The President's version comes down to this, that Mr. Ngasana, who had been trying to get an inquiry off the ground into the fitness for office of these three impugned advocates, requested without any incentive, financial or otherwise, to be allowed to vacate office on the basis of the discord that these three were causing. But the integrity of the 3 advocates had been impugned, not that of Mr. Ngasana. Why?
As the judgment continues there, we will come back to that a little bit later to conclude that judgment. But right now, we're back at Life Isidimeni.
I want to ask a few families, then I can go there. And I want it to be properly arranged so that I don't seem to be intruding into the privacy. But I just want to go to individual families and say, me, not as Dr. Bani, not as anything, just as a human being. I want to come to you and say, if I could ask God to reverse this process, I would really ask God to reverse this process. You didn't deserve this type of thing. And I'm so sorry about that. This is where people will say you die many, many, many times. Some of us, in myself in particular, I die many, many times. It's not easy. You know, Justice, you said it easily yesterday when you said you are going to be able to sleep tonight. You said that. And I said, I wonder if Justice knows that it's so difficult to sleep. At 1 a.m., you wonder, somebody somewhere is sitting and crying and saying, but why did these people do this to us? I'm so sorry. And I'm so remorseful. The problem with remorse, you can't measure it and say, this is remorse. That's why I want to go to individual families. I want you to open your homes for me. And you don't have to open your hearts as yet. Just open your homes. If you want me to talk to you at the gate, I'll talk at the gate. Oh, Mama, I know that, Mama. I know that. It's I can't explain it. I don't know how much can I ask for forgiveness. As human beings, our capacity to forgive is limited. We always hope that God gives us power to be able to cross the path of anger and forgive others. I know what you are saying, Mom. And that is why perhaps I want to go to the individual homes and touch each and every family so that I can, as you touch me, I can touch you and we feel the pain together. It has been the worst nightmare of my life. And I hope God will chart a way for all of us. And those managers who implemented the program, they must also find themselves. But before I even finish, Justice, I want to say something. I want to say, I suspected that you could see my heart. When you were pressing me to give you a name, I'm the type of person who says, carry the cross. I hope the leaders who will be coming here, typical of our leaders, if they hear these cries, these families don't want excuses. They're not going to be happy to hear, no, it's the HOD, no, it's so and so. We must all take accountability for what we have done. It can't be that, like it always happens, it's not me, I'm just up there, I don't see anything. it is the official. I hope and I trust them that they'll have the courage of being leaders and not try, if they can hear these cries, and not try and make it happy and nice for themselves. I'm just an oversight. I didn't know it is the HOD. I'm hoping they don't do that. They must be honest. We must all be honest, Justice. We must confront the demon that we have created and say, we humble ourselves. I kneel. I ask for forgiveness. Please find it in your heart to forgive me. I also want to say, Justice, I want to say, Justice, again, that I want to extend my appreciation to council that is here. They are good people. Council, I'll start that side, Council Kraus. I thank you very much. You are representing what we are failing to represent. And I thank you very much. I think I just heard now, Council Stein, please pass my regards to Advocate Hasim. I've worked with her previously. Council Nguchana, I don't know your assistant. Thank you very much, sir. You are doing what all of us should be doing to protect the weak. And I also gained a brother, Advocate Dirk Groenewald, if you don't mind, I call you by name, Dirk. After yesterday, Dirk, there's something remarkable that you did for me with your colleague. And I said, the human spirit will always be above all of us. You came and we hugged, if you recall, and we held each other like brothers that have known each other forever. And I thank you for that. And I truly thank you for that. You are a good brother. We will meet in a mall one day. And Advocate, and thank you to your colleague. I missed your name, sir. And Advocate Hutama, thank you very much. You are doing what we should have done for our own people here, and we have failed dismally. And with your colleagues, I may not know them with their name. The last point, Justice, I hope that God gives you the strength. I hope that if you know the story of Solomon, he was generally confronted by difficult problems. But he sat there, and God gave him wisdom. And he could untangle difficult problems. I hope you find that wisdom that you have, God adds more, so that we find finally closure for our families. Like I said, I want to go to them. But also, it's a difficult leadership role. I hope God also makes you Moses, that you carry this journey in a difficult situation. Every day, coming here, listening to pain. If you check the Bible, that's what exactly Moses went through. Listening to pain, listening to people. And I hope, lastly, that I would like to touch just one family, if it allows, so that I can start a chain where I'll be able to touch other families. I hope I can just touch one family and say, I'm starting a chain. Can I visit you at your homes so that I can start a chain where we can start talking? And you are free as families to say anything to me. I will absorb it, and I will take it. Can I just touch one family, Justice?
Father, I ask you to come, Father Mabue. Father is a believer like you, and I think it will be much easier for you to talk about forgiveness. Re ba go neele mic tu gore utlwagale. Ke go bitsa o le moruti le modumedi ra tsamaya yaanong a kere.
Ke kopa yana bana beso ba re leng teng ka fa. Re tshwaraneng ka matsogo. Hold our hands together with each other and pray in whatever language you wish to pray and say, thank you, God. We have heard the truth. And thank God for Dr. Silabano. As he has been saying that our hearts have been broken and we have been very much doubtful about him right from the beginning. But thank you, God, that he has come up to say, I am sorry. No man doneleo se alela pambe kwa baondi kolele ba baondi kole. Things
broke down as Silabano apologizes to them. Heartfelt moments right there. But we're going to break away shortly and go back to court, where Mxolisi Nkosana, the former NPA head, is in the spotlight. Of course, the court case regarding his 17 million rand payout, and of course, he wants his job back.
Of Bengunyama. We take from this case the notion that if the invalid act cannot wholly be undone, respect for the rule of law would require that nonetheless it must be undone in such a manner that the result still projects respect for the Constitution and the rule of law. We suggest that in this case, this implies a result that underscores the imperative of non-interference in the independence of the NPA and its national director. Third, in this litigation, as in the President's and the NPA's appeal to the SCA, Advocate Abrahams has associated himself inconsistent with the imperative of prosecutorial independence on all material issues with the position of the President. An example, the 3 points he argued, that is the vacancy issue, the conflict issue, and the remedies. Fourth, his conduct in the litigation went even further. He attacked the case of the applicants, non-profit organizations, in language such as, and I quote, I submit that the relief sought is unmeritorious, illogical, incompetent, and amounts to an absurdity, I close quotes. He had little reserve in casting sweeping aspersions, and I quote, I established that there were some serious criticisms of Advocate Jiba in the court judgments, but much of the material placed before the courts had been manipulated and actuated by ulterior motives with a view to getting rid of Advocate Jiba, I close quotes. In the same vein, and I quote, I ascertained that the criminal proceedings and the GCB application were not initiated by disinterested persons who wished to protect the integrity of the institution. In fact, they could be traced to officials within the NPA centered around Mr. Nkosana, who had long been at loggerheads with Advocate Jiba, I close quotes. This is disconcerting language, and on the face of it, suggesting of a lack of appreciation for whether or not the complaints that were raised, for instance, against Advocate Jiba were meritorious, irrespective of their source. The judgments that questioned the integrity of Advocates Jiba, Mkhwebe, and Zinyati were judgments of the High Court, and Advocate Abrahams should not have questioned, but should instead have acted on their result. And in the event, the judgment of Lekhodi J in the GCB matter vindicated the complaints. That leaves, as regards the position of Abrahams, the argument put up on his behalf, namely that Mr. Nkosana was entitled lawfully to relinquish his position outside of the framework of the NPA Act. As mentioned already, he relied on the Steinhoff case. Advocate Abrahams submitted that that was a proper interpretation of Section 12.8 of the NPA Act, and that Mr. Nxasana could resign unilaterally. Council for Corruption Watch and Freedom Under Law distinguished the Steinhoff judgment from the present matter on the basis that Section 13 deals with magistrates and not a single NDPP, and that there the magistrate had a right to resign under the previous regime, and it was held he should not be prejudicially affected by the new statutory regime, whereas the NPA Act is a completely new regime. In our view, the essential points of distinction between that case and these are the differences in the two legislative backgrounds and the current legislative milieu. We refer here first to the entitlement of magistrates to have resigned under the previous legislative regime and the general approach to interpretation that requires explicit language before taking away rights previously conferred. Second, and perhaps more important, we refer to the current legislative milieu and the paramount position that the prosecutorial authority and prosecutorial independence assumes in our constitutional arrangement. It would be surprising if, given this context, a unilateral resignation with no need for approval were permissible, despite the clearly higher bar of a request to vacate, coupled with expressed reasons that are reasonably deemed by the President to be sufficient. There is another consideration. Advocate Abrahams relied on the Steinhoff case to support the proposition that a resignation other than in the terms of Section 12.8 was not unlawful. But Steinhoff does not assist Advocate Abrahams' contention because Steinhoff's resignation was unilateral, whereas that of Mr. Nxasana was procured by promise of unlawful reward. In these circumstances, we do not believe that it would be just and equitable either to reinstate Mr. Nxasana or to leave Advocate Abrahams as permanent NDPP. In our view, it would be just and equitable if the position were declared vacant for a short period of, say, 60 days, for it to be filled by appropriate appointment within that period. Is the current president conflicted? The applicants submit that President Zuma is disqualified from appointing a national director of public prosecutions given the raft of criminal charges he is facing. Their argument founds on the following two provisions of the Constitution, which is Section 90, and I quote, acting president, subsection 1. When the president is absent from the Republic or otherwise unable to fulfill the duties of president, or during a vacancy in the office of president, an office bearer in the order below acts as president. And in A, we have the deputy president, close quotes. The provision that deals with conflicts of interest is Section 96. The interests that are said to be conflicted are the president's private interests resulting from the host of criminal charges against him, specifically given his concession and the finding by the SCA that the decision to withdraw them was irrational, and as against that, his official responsibility to appoint the NDPP in terms of Section 10 of that Act. The President argued that he is not conflicted because he is not actually facing the charges yet. The NDPP must first decide again to arraign him since the charges were actually withdrawn. He submits too that Section 90 envisages the appointment of the Deputy President instead of the President and not together with the President, and thus does not apply to the facts here. Advocate Abrahams, the NDPP, decide whether or not again to charge the President, makes common course with the President, explicitly endorsing the submissions made on his behalf. He submits that even if the President were conflicted, the Constitution does not assist because Section 90 was intended to address a different situation. But he went further. He submitted that even if the president were conflicted, that matters not, because when he appoints the NDPP, he acts as head of the national executive and thus in cabinet. Since the members of the cabinet are not similarly conflicted, his being conflicted will be so diluted as to disappear. We cannot agree with either the president's submissions or those of Advocate Abrams. In a rights-based order, it is fundamental that a conflicted person cannot act. To act despite a conflict is self-evidently to pervert the rights being exercised, as well as the rights of those affected. And Section 96(2)(b) makes that clear beyond the pale. If conflicted, the individual simply cannot act, is unable to act, whether Section 90 was there or not. In this light, all Section 90 does is to identify the person who must act whenever the president, by virtue of a conflict, is unable. And it is the deputy president who does not get sworn in. She simply performs the act which the president himself is unable to perform. In our view, President Zuma would be clearly conflicted in having to appoint a national director of public prosecutions, given the background to which we have referred, particularly the ever-present specter of the many criminal charges against him that have not gone away. There is no longer any obstacle in the way of the criminal charges proceeding. The president told the SCA that he, and I quote, had every intention in the future to continue to use such processes as are available to him to resist prosecution, I close quote. In other words, not to stand trial at all, and this would place the incumbent NDPP firmly on the spot. It seems incongruous that under those circumstances, President Zuma should then be seen to be appointing the NDPP, since his conflict, both actual and perceived, is self-evident. Judges decline routinely to sit in matters in which they are conflicted. I turn now to the constitutional challenge by CASA. It is necessary to refer to the two provisions that are being challenged. And I quote, Section 12, term of office of National Director and Deputy National Directors, subsection 1. The National Director shall hold office for a non-renewable period of 10 years, but must vacate his or her office on attaining the age of 65. Subsection 4. If the President is of the opinion that it is in the public interest to retain a National Director or a Deputy National Director in his or her office beyond the age of 65 years, and A, the National Director or Deputy National Director wishes to continue to serve in such period, and B, the mental and physical health of the person concerned enable him or her to so continue, the President may from time to time direct that he or she be so retained, but not for a period which exceeds, or periods which in the aggregate exceed 2 years, provided that the National Director's term of office shall not exceed 10 years. Subsection 6A, the President may provisionally suspend the National Director or a Deputy National Director from his or her office, pending such inquiry into his or her office, or her fitness to hold such office as the President deems fit, and subject to the provisions of this subsection, may thereupon remove him or her from office for misconduct on account of continued ill health, on account of incapacity to carry out his or her duties of office efficiently, or on account thereof that he or she is no longer a fit and proper person to hold the office concerned. The removal of the National Director or Deputy National Director the removal of the National Director or a Deputy National Director, the reason thereof, and the representations of the National Director or Deputy National Director, if any, shall be communicated by message to Parliament within 14 days after such removal if Parliament is then in session, or if Parliament is not then in session, within 14 days after the commencement of its next ensuing session. Parliament shall, within 30 days after the message referred to in paragraph B has been tabled in Parliament, or as soon thereafter as is reasonably possible, pass a resolution as to whether or not the restoration to his or her office of the National Director or Deputy National Director so removed is recommended. The President shall restore the National Director or Deputy National Director to his or her office if Parliament so resolves. The National Director or Deputy National Director provisionally suspended from office shall receive, for the duration of such suspension, no salary or such salary as may be determined by the President. I close quotes. The applicant submitted that Section 12.4 was inconsistent with the Constitution, relying by parity of reasoning on the Justice Alliance case. There, the Constitutional Court held that Section 8A of the Judges' Remuneration and Conditions of Employment Act, which allowed the President to request a Chief Justice who is about to be discharged from active service to continue in office as the Chief Justice for an additional period determined by the President, if the Chief Justice acceded to that request, as unconstitutional. Thus, the Constitutional Court held that powers of extension of tenure were inimical to judicial independence, which implies in turn freedom from external interference. The applicant relied too on the Helen Suzman Foundation case versus the President of the Republic of South Africa and the Glenister case, which were concerned with the adequacy of structural and operational independence of the Hawks in the South African Police Service. The same principle, that of jealously guarding against external muscling by the executive, was applied. This is, of course, powerful, but also binding authority if it applied with equal constitutional justification to the position of the NDPP. The applicant submitted that it did, given amongst others the impartiality exacted of the NDPP in terms of Section 32(1) of the NPA Act. The respondents did not challenge the conceptual founding of the applicant's argument. Rather, they argued that the declaration of constitutional invalidity sought was academic and thus untoward on the authority of the Shuttleworth case. It seems to us that the Shuttleworth case was a very different case altogether for the following reasons. First, there is the ambitious reach of the Shuttleworth case. Not only were a number of provisions of the exchange control regulations targeted, but the boundaries of the fallout of an order of unconstitutionality were not evident. Here, 2 subsections only are targeted, and its effect in both cases is clear. Second, Shuttleworth's locus standi to act in the public interest had not been shown. Here, it is not disputed. Third, Shuttleworth's contentions were disputed. Here, they are not. And fourth, there are, in this case, wholly absent in Shuttleworth constitutional court authority that, if not directly, certainly is close to being important. In the result, the challenge to the presidential power under Section 12.4 to extend the tenure of the NDPP is upheld, and we make an appropriate order below. That leaves Section 12.6 and its allegedly objectionable features of a unilateral presidential power to suspend for an indefinite period and without pay. Here, as stated, the applicant relied on the Helen Suzman Foundation case. It relied too on the case of McBride versus Minister of Police. Thus, the power to suspend without pay defies the exceedingly important presumption of innocence until proven guilty, or the audi alteram partem rule. In this matter, the President did not attack the principle underlying the argument, but argued that the declaration would be academic. But for reasons already given, we do not agree. The minister argued that the fact of a potential review of the irrational exercise of a presidential power was a complete answer to the constitutionality attack, but submitted the applicant. This proposition has been rejected by the Constitutional Court in the Glenister case, and we agree. Costs and the order were granted. Since the applicants are successful, it is unnecessary to engage on the applicability of the BioWatch principle. In the result, we make the following order on the application of Corruption Watch and Freedom under law. 1. The settlement agreement between the President, the Minister of Justice, and Mr. Nwasana, dated 14 May 2015, is reviewed, declared invalid, and set aside. 2. The termination of the appointment of Mr. Nwasana as National Director of Public Prosecutions is declared unconstitutional and invalid. 3. The decision to authorize payment to Mr. Nwasana of an amount of 17,357,233 rands in terms of the settlement is reviewed, declared invalid, and set aside. 4. The appointment of Advocate Abrams as National Director of Public Prosecutions is reviewed, declared invalid, and set aside. 5. Decisions taken and acts performed by Advocate Abrams in his capacity as the National Director of Public Prosecutions are not invalid merely because of the invalidity of his appointment. 6. Mr. Nwasana is ordered forthwith to repay to the state all the money he received in terms of the settlement. 7. It is declared that in terms of Section 96(2)(b) of the Constitution, the incumbent president may not appoint, suspend, or remove the National Director of Public Prosecutions or someone in an acting capacity as such. 8. It is declared that as long as the incumbent president is in office, the deputy president is responsible for decisions relating to the appointment, suspension, or removal of the National Director of Public Prosecutions, or, in terms of Section 11(2)(b) of the National Prosecution Authority Act, someone in an acting capacity as such. 9. The orders of invalidity in paragraphs 2 and 4 above are suspended for a period of 60 days or until such time as the Deputy President has appointed a National Director of Public Prosecutions in terms of paragraph 8 above, whichever is the shorter period. The cost of this application must be paid jointly and severally by the President, the Minister of Justice, Advocate Abrams, and the National Prosecuting Authority. In the result, we make the following order on the application of the Council for the Advancement of the South African Constitution. 1. It is declared that Section 12(4) of the National Prosecuting Authority Act 32 of 1998 is unconstitutional and invalid. 2. It is declared that Section 12(6) of the National Prosecuting Authority Act is unconstitutional and invalid to the extent that it permits the President to suspend the National Director of Public Prosecutions unilaterally, indefinitely, and without pay. 3. The order of invalidity in paragraph 2 is suspended for 18 months. During the period of suspension, 1. An additional subsection shall be inserted after Section 12(6)(a) that reads, the period from the time the President suspends the National Director or a National Director to the time he or she decides whether or not to remove the National Director or Deputy National Director shall not exceed 6 months. And Section 12(6)(e) shall read, the National Director or Deputy National Director provisionally suspended from office shall receive for the duration of such suspension his or her full salary. 5. Should the President fail to enact legislation, should Parliament fail to enact legislation remedying the defect identified in paragraph 2, the interim order in paragraph 4 shall become final. The President, the Minister of Justice, and the National Prosecuting Authority shall pay the applicant's costs, including the cost of 2 counsels. The orders of invalidity made above relating to the National Prosecuting Authority Act are referred to the Constitutional Court in terms of Section 1655 of the Constitution for confirmation.
I agree.
I agree. And so it is ordered, and I hand down the judgment. Court adjourns. Right. Sure.
Do you have a funeral policy?
No matter the sacrifices you've made or the hours you've worked, you can't always say yes. Avbob's Cashback Funeral Plan not only provides funeral insurance for your family, but also helps you to say yes to life's little extras more often. Because for every 5 claim-free years, you'll get your 5th year's premiums based on your monthly premium value paid back in cash. SMS Cash 1 to 41790 at no cost, and we'll call you. Avbob, we're here for you.
If you want an AFBOB representative to contact you, SMS Cash 1 and your name to 41790.
Take your evening well informed with Primetime News.
Thanks for tuning in. You're watching SABC News Prime. The burning land reform issue was also a point of discussion on the first day.
If you do not have a skills revolution, you will run into the kind of problems that we're having at the moment.
We have funded about 466,000 students, out of about 800,000 students that are in the university system.
South Africa says insufficient electricity and water remains one of the biggest barriers to development and prosperity on the continent.
The top 4 batsmen in the squad, Hashim Amla, Quinton de Kock, Faf du Plessis and AB de Villiers, are certainties in the starting lineup.
I really believe we cover all bases when it comes to spin bowling, seam bowling, proper pace bowling, and an amazing batting lineup.
Stay tuned every Monday to Sunday from 6 p.m.
Thank you very much. Quick look at what's happening in the world of sports before we get into the weekend. And the big deal really is, after all those heavy news from the different court cases and crossings, we talk about Amajita, the South African under-20 national football team who've won the opening match of the 2017 COSAFA Cup tournament in Zambia. They beat Mauritius 2-0 in Group B thanks to a second-half brace by Lyle Foster. The win sees South Africa go top of their group on goal difference with Egypt, who defeated Mozambique 1-0 in the opening match in second place.
In pouring conditions, the game got off to a slow start, neither side managing to dominate position, thus resulting in limited goal-scoring opportunities. With the weather improving, Amajita started playing more attacking football. However, Mauritius' goalkeeper stood resolute between the sticks, producing brilliant saves to keep his team in the contest. 20 minutes into the match, the men in green and gold continued to commit more players going forward in search of the opener. However, there was no beating Pierre Figaro in the first half. Amajita continued where they left off at the end of the first half, but they continued to be wasteful in front of goals. 20 minutes before the end of the referee's regulation time, South Africa were finally rewarded for their attacking brand of football. Lyle Foster scored the goal to put Amajita in the lead. Foster was not done in netting his second of the match in referee's added time to put the results beyond doubt. Joseph Mohali, SABC News.
So let's have a quick look at what's happening in the domestic league, the ABSA Premiership matches for the weekend starting tonight. We've got an interesting one between Maritzburg United and Baroka FC. You'll remember Baroka FC, one of the 4 teams that are currently sitting on 19 points at the top of the log. I'll get to that in a short while. In terms of what's happening over the rest of the weekend, we've got no less than 5 matches being played tomorrow. Vets against Polokwane City trying to come off the bottom of the log. 3:30 kickoff there. Another 3:30 kickoff, this time in Mbombela, is Super SuperSport United against Cape Town City. Platinum Stars take on Kaizer Chiefs, who are looking for a win. They've gone 5 matches within a row without a win, have Kaizer Chiefs. Orlando Pirates against AmaZulu FC, trying to revive their fortunes. And then Ajax, they play Chippa United at that being played at 8:15 on Saturday night. On Sunday, Golden Arrows play Mamelodi Sundowns at Princess Magogo, and Bloemfontein Celtic up against Free State Stars, and those 2 matches kicking off at 3:30. Now let's have a quick look at how things stand before a single ball is kicked this weekend. As I said a little earlier, 4 teams at the top on 19 points. Goal difference really is what separates all of them. Mamelodi Sundowns right at the top, Chippa United joining Baroka. Orlando Pirates are also sitting on 19 points in 4th place. Arrows, Cape Town City, Kaizer Chiefs and Free State Stars bring up the rest of the top 8. Look at the bottom half of the log. In the bottom half of the log, the first thing you'll notice is that Bidvest Fits, the current defending champions of the Upset Premiership from last year, are sitting on 10 points and stone last. Ajax Cape Town also in 10 points, right there in the relegation zone. Go up back up to top where 9th position is Bloem Celtic, SuperSport United and Maritzburg United, as well as AmaZulu. They're sitting on 14 points, then Platinum and Polokwane City bring up the rest. Now we stay a little bit with football news, where Portugal's Cristiano Ronaldo was awarded the Ballon d'Or for World Player of the Year last night for the 2nd time in a row and joint record 5th time, going level with eternal rival and Barcelona forward Lionel Messi as a player to have won the prize the most often times. No other player has won the award since Kaká collected it in 2007.
Every year, every season. So I'm glad that last year we did amazing season. We win the Champions League, we win the La Liga. And in terms of individual, I was the best scorer in the Champions League. I'm still motivating, and I'm playing a fantastic club and a fantastic national team. So let's see what the future brings. So in this moment, I'm very happy.
The prestigious Volvo Ocean Race has made its pit stop in South Africa. The yachts leave the mother city on the 3rd leg in Melbourne on Sunday. The yachting world is focused on Cape Town at present, and the race also brings a significant economic boost of about 500 million rands and lots of job creation to the mother city. The 45,000-mile nautical race, which takes 9 months to complete, also focuses on sustainability and awareness about conservation, with about 8 million tons of plastic dumped into the ocean every single year.
There are 12 host cities during the Volvo Ocean Race, and it's a great privilege for Cape Town to be associated with cities such as Lisbon, Melbourne, Auckland and Hong Kong. The economic impact for Cape Town is huge, with lots of spin-offs.
There's a lot of impact. Haven't finalised measurements, but to give you some idea, we're sitting on just 1 million people that's been exposed to the Volvo Ocean Race and the brand. And based on the principles that we used last time around, I think we're going to beat by about 30 to 40%. So I think we're looking at about 500 to 600 million impact for Cape Town.
The race focuses on ocean sustainability, with predictions alarmingly forecasting that there could be more plastic than fish in the ocean by 2050.
In terms of sustainability, what we've done is we've taken on that mantle. So I've just walked out of now, maybe that's why I'm over Ocean Summit, where we've got 160 speakers from around the world, all different academics, ocean warriors, talking about how do we protect the ocean against plastics.
With the current water restrictions in Cape Town, the organisers, through using grey water and other initiatives, have reduced water usage from 1 million litres to about 100,000 litres for the race stopover. Plans are also afoot to train young South African sailors at an academy to hopefully participate in the next Volvo Ocean Race. Craig Murray, SABC News, Cape Town.
And that's where we leave it with the sport. Back now to Elvis. He's got breaking news.
Thank you, Kendall. Of course, you've just seen the court case. Let's now go live to court, where our reporter Sipho Stearman is waiting for us there to give us an update. Sipho, very good morning to you. Can you recap for us what came out of the judgment this morning?
Very good morning to you and our viewers at home. Well, indeed, it's a breaking news filled morning here in the Pretoria High Court, where the full bench consisting of 3 judges, of course, with Judge President Mlambo delivering the judgment on this matter. This was of course, the application brought by Corruption Watch and Freedom Under Law, where they had asked the court to reverse that 2015 decision that saw former NDTP head Nkosi Nqasana vacating his office being offered 17 million rands golden handshake. They came to the court to ask that it be declared unlawful, and indeed they were successful in that respect and in many other respects. And if I can just recap for you, the court ordered that the settlement be set aside and that Mr. Ngasana must pay back that 17 million rands. Mr. Ngasana himself, of course, in court affidavits has said that he had no problems in paying that money back, but had also stated that he was willing to be reinstated in his position as that is the NPA head. However, the court found that because he participated in a settlement deal that certainly that was found to be unlawful, that Mr. Ngasana acted recklessly in accepting that deal, even though he was not the one who made the request to leave office, but by the virtue of accepting that money, he was acting recklessly. And also the president was also, President Zuma, also received a lot of criticism that, offering that amount of money to force out Ngasana was also a reckless decision on his part. The court, of course, then went on to say another part of the application by the two bodies that came was that the president must not be allowed to make any further appointments when it comes to NPA head, stating that the president is conflicted. You would know that there's a lot of legal battles that he's facing, particularly the spy tapes saga, so saying that obviously he has a direct interest then in who would head up the NPA and how they would handle that matter. And if you look at the history of it, it would suggest that this matter is very important to the president, and of course there has been some various delay tactics being played by the president, and certainly previous acting or NPA heads have come under pressure in terms of taking the decision when it comes to this matter. But before I go further on that, let's just also touch on the fact that the court also said that Sean Abraham's appointment is declared invalid and should be set aside, which means that as I speak to you right now, Sean Abrahams is not the head of the NPA. That position is vacant. And then another, groundbreaking then ruling that came was that the president, Zuma himself, then is not allowed to appoint the new NPA head, and that the decision would then, that duty would fall on the hands of the deputy president, that is currently Cyril Ramaphosa, who has to then appoint a new NPA head within 60 days. So that's what we have for you here, Elvis. It's groundbreaking. The application was brought by Corruption Watch and Freedom Under Law. Of course, it has gone overwhelmingly their way, but of course we know that Ngasana, who had indicated that he's willing to come back, he's not been reinstated. The position of NPA head remains vacant, and President Zuma has been ordered to not appoint a person to fill that position.
Sipho, thank you so much. But just briefly, is there any timeline to Sean Abrams stepping down and, of course, Nkosana going back into that position?
Well, actually, Ngasana is not going back to that position. The court mentioned that very well. It questioned his conduct in terms of accepting an illegal, payout, as it been declared here, saying that he acted recklessly. So let me clarify that very well, that Ngasana is not going out. However, he did declare interest that he would go back. However, he's not. The only thing that's expected from him is to pay back the 17 million golden handshake. The Deputy President, Cyril Ramaphosa, has been given a timeline of 60 days to appoint a new NPA head. So we will have to await and see how that process will unfold. But of course, we know that chances are these decisions will be appealed. So this will be taking much longer than the specified period. As we have seen previously with various court judgments, there's always appeals that delay, the implementation of court rulings.
Sipho, thank you so much for that update there. That's our reporter live from the court there, Sipho Steerman, giving us the latest coming from there. There you heard it. Of course, the 17 million rand will be repaid. Sean Abrams, as we speak, no longer the NPA head. And the president cannot appoint another NPA head. Wow, that's where we got to leave it today. From myself, Elvis Preston, and the team, we'll bid you farewell until Monday. We hope that you have a fantastic weekend ahead. So ciao for now. Arrivederci!
weekly dose of art and entertainment news. Tune into Trends every Saturday from 12 to 1.
Take your evening well informed with primetime news.
Thanks for tuning in. You're watching SABC News Prime. The burning land reform issue was also a point of discussion on the first day.
If you do not have a skills revolution, you will run into the kind of problems that we're having at the moment.
We funded about 466,000 students, out of about 800,000 students that are in the university system.
South Africa says insufficient electricity and water remains one of the biggest barriers to development and prosperity on the continent.
The top 4 batsmen in the squad, Hashim Amla, Quinton de Kock, Faf du Plessis and AB de Villiers, are certainties in the starting lineup.
I really believe we cover all bases when it comes to spin bowling, seam bowling, proper pace bowling, and an amazing batting lineup.
Stay tuned every Monday to Sunday from 6 p.m.
In the belly of the beast, the vulnerable are easy targets in the streets. Marauding gangs terrorize communities mercilessly. With no respect for human life. Animals are also not spared. The money business knows no boundaries. There is no respect for life. Helpless communities, silenced by their pain. Can their last defense be in time to the rescue? Special assignment, Saturday at 5:30 p.m. when we unravel the truth.